The night was cold, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine and fresh snow. A soft blanket of fog crept along the ground, rolling through the woods as the wind whispered through the bare branches of the trees. It was a quiet night, the kind that made the world feel still, as though everything was holding its breath. In the distance, the soft, haunting sound of Christmas carols could be heard, faint but clear in the silence of the woods. The song echoed through the trees, growing softer and softer, as if calling someone. Or something. Something about it felt wrong, like a forgotten memory tugging at the edges of your mind. You might be out for a walk, enjoying the peaceful winter night, when you come upon it. A Christmas tree. But not just any tree. It was standing alone, deep in the woods, surrounded by nothing but darkness and fog. The lights on the tree glowed brightly, almost too brightly, casting an unnatural glow that seemed to pull at your very soul. It was beautiful, like something out of a dream. But deep down, you know that some dreams are best left unexplored. And as you stand there staring at the tree, a thought creeps into your mind. Don't approach it. The night had settled in around Sarah as she walked along the narrow path through the woods, her boots crunching in the snow with every step. She'd always found peace in these woods, far from the bustle of town, far from the crowds and the chaos of the holiday season. A quiet walk had become her tradition, the only time she could escape and breathe away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the holiday obligations. Her thoughts wandered as she walked, memories of past Christmases flickering through her mind, the warmth of family gatherings, the smell of gingerbread, the sound of laughter. It all felt so distant now. This year everything had changed. The loss of her father weighed heavily on her heart, and the joy of the season had faded into a dull ache. As she made her way deeper into the woods, the trees stretched high above her, their dark branches tangled in a canopy of mist. The air was still and heavy. The only sound was the soft whisper of the wind through the leaves. Sarah paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the forest around her. The moonlight filtered through the branches, casting a soft, silvery glow on the snow below. She had always loved this place, but tonight there was something different about it. The woods felt alive. Her breath formed a cloud in the cold air, and she continued on, pushing through the underbrush. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon something that made her stop in her tracks, an odd, out-of-place glow through the trees. Curiosity piqued, Sarah approached the source of the light. There, nestled among the tall pine trees, stood a Christmas tree. But not just any tree. This one was tall and perfectly shaped, adorned with sparkling lights that twinkled with an almost unnatural brightness. It was strange. Sarah couldn't remember seeing a Christmas tree out here before, not in the depths of the woods. There were no houses nearby, no roads, just miles of trees and snow. Yet here it was, standing alone in the dark, like it had been waiting for her. Her pulse quickened, and her hand instinctively went to her chest. She felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of unease, a chill that wasn't from the cold. Something about the tree felt wrong. The lights, though beautiful, seemed almost too bright, too vivid, casting an unnatural glow on the surrounding trees. The branches shimmered with tinsel, and red ribbons twisted around the tree's trunk, but it all felt too perfect, too pristine, as if it had been placed there just for her to find. As she stepped closer, the wind seemed to shift, carrying with it the faintest sound. Soft, gentle music, almost like a lullaby. The carolers' voices drifted on the breeze, the notes familiar but distant, like they were coming from somewhere beyond the trees. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The song was too familiar. She couldn't place it, but it felt as if she had heard it before, many years ago. in another lifetime. Despite her growing unease, Sarah felt herself drawn to the tree. There was something so hypnotic about it, like a memory she couldn't quite reach. She took another step forward, her feet moving almost of their own accord until she was standing at the base of the tree. And that's when she saw it, the faint outline of something moving in the shadows, just behind the tree. Something that shouldn't have been there. She pushed the pine cart sideways to the table and propped it up against the wall. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she stepped back, her eyes frantically scanning the dark woods. The movement behind the tree was gone, but the feeling of being watched remained, hanging in the air like an oppressive weight. The carolers' song grew louder, but it didn't come from any particular direction. It seemed to surround her, emanating from every tree, from the very earth beneath her feet. Sarah's pulse raced, and she could feel her hands beginning to tremble. What is this place? The wind picked up again, swirling around the tree as if responding to her thoughts, carrying with it a soft whisper. A voice, gentle and soothing, but laced with something dark. Relativity? Come closer. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The voice was unmistakably human, and yet it felt wrong. It wasn't calling her directly, but she felt the pull, like a whisper at the edge of her mind. She took a step back, feeling the weight of the tree's gaze on her, but her feet wouldn't obey. Her legs felt heavy, like she was being dragged toward the tree. With every step closer, the music grew louder, clearer. The carolers' voices began to change, the melody now eerie, almost haunting. The light from the tree seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the music, drawing her nearer. Then, without warning, the shadow behind the tree shifted again. This time, it was unmistakable. A figure stepped into the light. A tall, thin figure, draped in dark robes, its face obscured by a hood. The figure stood motionless, staring at Sarah with unblinking eyes. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, and every instinct screamed at her to run. But her body wouldn't listen. The pull was too strong, the song too captivating. The figure's hands reached out, but instead of human hands, they were covered in dark, gnarled branches. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't just a tree. It wasn't just a Christmas decoration. The figure was something else. Something old, something that had been waiting for her. The song wasn't a carol at all. It was a lure, a trap, meant to bring her closer, to take her into the woods where she would disappear, just like those before her. Her heart pounded as she forced her legs to move, the fog around her thickening. She knew she had to get away, but the figure's gaze locked onto hers, and the carolers' voices grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "Don't come any closer," she whispered to herself. But it was too late. She was already too close. Meeting her eyes, the cat. The figure moved slowly toward Sarah, its body swaying unnaturally, as if the wind itself was carrying it forward. Her heart beat erratically, the pulse in her ears drowning out everything but the music and the figure's chilling presence. She could feel the frost creeping under her boots, the cold pressing in from all sides. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the forest itself had wrapped its tendrils around her, holding her in place. The figure stopped just a few feet away from her, the shadow of its hood now shifting, revealing two hollow, empty eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. "Welcome," the voice whispered again, this time much clearer, and it sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Sarah wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but she couldn't. The pull was too strong, and the song too overpowering. Her feet, frozen in place, refused to obey her. She could feel herself being drawn into the figure's gaze, and for a moment she was lost, drowning in the darkness of its eyes. Then Suddenly, the figure raised its hand, and the music stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, and in that silence, Sarah could hear something else. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the snow behind her. She spun around, but there was nothing. The forest was empty, save for the trees, the fog, and the ominous presence of the figure before her. The figure's lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered. The figure's smile faded as the last notes of the eerie carol drifted into the cold night air. Sarah's pulse raced, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. But then, as if on cue, a sudden gust of wind stirred the fog around them, and the figure took a step back, its form dissolving into the mist. The Christmas tree, too, began to fade, its glowing lights flickering like distant stars, before they blinked out, one by one, leaving the forest in complete darkness. The silence returned, thick and suffocating, yet somehow more comforting now. Sarah stood frozen, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The figure, the tree, the haunting carol. It was all slipping away like a dream she couldn't quite remember. She could still feel the lingering pull of the song, the sensation of being watched. But the forest was quiet now, and the unnatural fog had lifted, revealing the familiar trees she had walked past countless times. With shaky legs, she turned and began to make her way back down the path, her footsteps slower, more deliberate. She kept her eyes on the ground, afraid that if she looked up she might see the figure again, or the tree, still waiting in the shadows. But the more she walked, the more she began to feel a sense of relief. The further she got from the woods, the easier it was to breathe. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the sky above had begun to lighten, and the first light of dawn touched the snow, turning it to soft pinks and oranges. Sarah paused at the tree line, her chest rising and falling with every breath, and she turned one last time to look back. The woods were empty, the Christmas tree was gone, the figure, the carolers, everything had disappeared. But something inside her told her that she hadn't truly escaped. For a fleeting moment she thought she heard the faintest trace of a carol in the wind, soft, far away, almost a whisper. But when she strained to listen, there was only silence. She took a deep breath, her heart slowing, and started the walk back to her car. The air felt clearer now, the dread lifting from her chest, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again venture into those woods alone. The strange haunting memory of the tree would stay with her, a shadow in the corners of her mind. According to legend, the farm was on the cusp of decay. Sarah never spoke of the Christmas tree or the figure in the woods to anyone. But each year, as the holiday season approached, she couldn't help but feel the same unease when walking through the forest. And every Christmas Eve, when the wind began to howl and the air grew cold, she swore she could hear the faintest carol drifting on the breeze, calling her back to the place she dared not go.